Hi, I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach all about parenting, family communication, and good relationships, all through the lens of self-government. In this video, I'm going to be talking about 7 common parenting traps that you can be aware of. Most parents have the best intentions. They want to do the best things for their children, but even parents with the best intentions can get trapped by some of their children's behaviors. In this video, I'm going to be talking about 7 of those behaviors that you might have been trapped by and you're not realizing that you're stuck, teaching your child that that bad behavior is actually something that benefits them. Did you know that when you respond to a behavior, that shows the person that the behavior worked? So if your child whines for a cookie and then you finally give in and give them the cookie, then they know that the whining is the way to get a cookie. So if your child's able to wear you down or something like that, then they will keep trying to wear you down in the future. Now, wearing you down is a pretty common misbehavior, but that's not one of the 7 that I'm going to be talking about today. In fact, we can talk about common mistakes or traps for hours, but today we're going to hit on 7 that you might not have recognized. Before I get into this list of 7, though, it's important to understand power struggles. All 7 of these common traps that are set for parents usually end up in power struggles, or are power struggles to begin with. A lot of parents do not understand that they actually are the ones starting power struggles a lot of the time. It's important to understand power struggles so that you do not start the power struggles in your family. When a person starts a power struggle, they try to get some emotional response from another person. If they can get a person talking or emotionally responding, then they have successfully started a power struggle. Now think about your parenting. Do you ever try to do something to try to get your child to be afraid? That's a power struggle. Or what about to try to get your child to feel love for you or pity for you? That's a power struggle. Those are all manipulations that people use to try to draw the child's thoughts or hearts or behavior toward them in some way. Sometimes we start power struggles in negative ways. That's a negative attention-seeking type behavior that parents and children both do. And sometimes we start power struggling by doing positive attention as well. So keeping in mind, we want to be completely honest with our children. If we are going to be a self-governing parent and we're going to teach them to be self-governing, we've got to remove all the power struggles and make everything deliberate instead. So let's talk about these 7 common traps that people can get sucked into and see if we can give ourselves some solutions for what to do instead. Parenting trap number 1 is classic, the retort. Some people will call it the debate. Some people will call it talking back. This is when a child just says something back to you. So maybe you say something like, you need to do your dishes. And the child says, it's not my turn. It's not my day. I did them yesterday. No, there are dishes in there that aren't mine, or whatever it is, and they talk back. Now here is the common mistake. The child has started a power struggle because they don't want to do the dishes. They had some anxiety or emotional response to being told that they needed to do an instruction, which could be resolved if you teach the child how to follow instructions, which there are plenty of videos on this channel that teach. So there is a skill set called how to follow instructions, and you'll want to definitely teach that to your child. But in this case, the child starts the power struggle. But if the parent talks back, if the parent says, it doesn't matter whose turn it is, I'm telling you, you need to do it, that is actually also engaging in a power struggle. If a parent says, no, your day was 2 days before, it is your day now. It was sister's turn yesterday. That is still engaging in the power struggle. It does not get the connection happening properly. And in order to have good parenting or a good transfer of information from parent to child, there has to be calmness and good connection. As long as you're going back and forth about a topic, you're in a behavior pattern that decreases connection. So keep that in mind. The retort. Super common trap, but we all have probably been sucked into it before because we're just surprised at what they told us when they retorted. Not talking back to children who talk back to me has always been one of my #1 rules, clear back from the days when I was doing treatment foster care for troubled teens and I was raising my own babies. So what do you do instead? So instead, you point toward calmness and the calm communication. Now, if you've taught your child ahead of time some key skills, like how to follow instructions, which include looking at the person, keeping a calm face, voice, and body, saying okay, or disagreeing appropriately, which is a whole other skill, doing the task immediately and then checking back, the child knows that they can either say okay or disagree appropriately with you. So they shouldn't have to retort because they can ask, may I disagree appropriately? And when they disagree appropriately, they're going to say something like, Mom, I know you want me to do the dishes, but I think I should tell you that I just did the dishes this morning and I think it's probably somebody else's turn. Now all of a sudden we have respectful communication that's happening in the front part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, instead of that emotional, reactive communication that's not going to go anywhere and just lead to power struggles. But if your child retorts, then you just need to say, right now, you are disagreeing, but it is not disagreeing appropriately. And then you go into a correction to tell them what they should have done and then what they've earned as far as a negative consequence goes. And you will then practice doing it the right way. You'll give them a chance to repeat that scenario using a good skill called disagreeing appropriately. As you can see, teaching your children skills ahead of time makes all the difference. Before I get to the rest of this list of traps that we could fall into very easily, leave me a comment about what types of parenting traps you have noticed that you've fallen into, or maybe you've noticed other people around you falling into as well. And let's see if some of the things you notice are things that I've noticed too. Trap number 2 is excuses. Excuses. So you give a child an instruction such as you need to go and take out the garbage. And then maybe the child does not take out the garbage, or they don't check back to you, they get distracted somehow. And then you come to them and say, okay, I told you you needed to take out the garbage and you said you would do it, but you didn't do it. And then immediately comes the excuses. Well, Dad told me that I needed to do this, or, well, I couldn't because I had to do this first, or whatever, okay? So now we have the excuses for the misbehavior. Many parents give in to excuses, and if you give in to excuses, then you're teaching the child not to take personal responsibility. This actually cripples the child in the end. You want them to learn that they have a responsibility to stay focused on the task at hand. Now again, back to the skill development. If they know how to follow instructions, they know they have to get back to a check back. They need to come to you and say, I did that task. Is there anything else you'd like me to do? And then you are going to praise them at that point. They also know that if something comes up that they can't do, then they can disagree appropriately. They can come to you and say, Mom, can I disagree appropriately about taking the garbage out? And then I would say, yes, you may. And they would say, I know you asked me to take out the garbage. I still plan on doing it, but something has come up. And would it be okay if I did this other thing first? Wow. Mature communication. It changes everything. But if Dad asks them to do something right when they're going to do something for you, guess what they can do too? They can disagree appropriately with Dad. And they can explain to Dad that they know he wants them to do something else, but they're already following through on an instruction for Mom to take out the garbage. And guess what? Dad's probably going to be okay with it unless whatever he needs them to do is an emergency. Children who create excuses all the time and get away with it end up oftentimes having entitlement problems because they don't have a habit of taking responsibility for themselves. So keep that in mind. And if you don't want your child to develop a habit of excuse making, make sure that you don't make excuses for your behavior either. Trap number 3 is emotional manipulations. There are a lot of different ways that people emotionally manipulate each other. So sometimes a person just gets silent. That's an emotional manipulation. They're putting up an emotional wall that they're expecting a person to have to try to break down. This is a way to maintain a power struggle or keep an emotional upper hand. So if your child is closing you out and won't talk to you, that's all the more reason you actually need to go and have a conversation with them. And the first conversation you're going to have is about how to communicate with you and how to get understood and how to get calm because they're not being calm. So we always point the children toward calmness before we talk about anything else. What other types of emotional manipulations are there? Well, there's crying, there's yelling, whining, hitting, attitude problems. There's people who just talk back or try to talk over you. Those are oftentimes all emotional manipulations to try to see if you can get a person to stop living their role, stop parenting you. You have to make sure that you are prepared ahead of time for what to say in any of these situations. In my TSG parenting course, I talk about something called effective corrections and something called the rule of three. The rule of three is designed to help a person get to calmness when they are trying all of these emotional manipulations. Many parents get tricked by just trying to placate or please the child when they're doing these emotional manipulations. That will just increase the emotional manipulations in the future. So it is important that we don't let them go anywhere. We don't give them any of our attention, but we do seek to understand the child after we get the child to a place of calmness. So let the child know we will understand each other. I want to know what you're telling me, but first we've got to get calm. Then we can talk about it. The next trap is dragging things out. So sometimes you tell a child, no, you can't do this. And then later they come back again, but mom, can't I please do this because whatever? And it's again and again, they keep coming back to you, nagging or trying to bring the situation up again and again. That is a type of dragging things out. And it's done in an effort to wear you down. Many parents can be worn down. They'll talk about something at first and then over time they're just tired of dealing with it and they want to move on, so they let the child have their way. That is not a good idea. Another type of dragging it out looks like this. Maybe the child is starting to go out of control. You are talking to the child about how they need to get calm and not be out of control. And then the child just keeps extending the emotion again and again and again to try to wear the parent out. It is important that we know the words that we will say when a child is going out of control. This again, that rule of three, super important there, especially for older children. We have another calm down strategy for younger children, but making sure the family knows how that's going to happen. And then once you've said the part that you need to say and you are waiting for them to just finally choose to get calm, then at that point you don't engage. You don't think about it anymore. You move on. And if you are not engaged in their dragging out process, soon they see this isn't really doing me any good. And then later, when they're in a calmer state of mind, you can talk about how it doesn't do any good and how you're always going to just tell them the things they need to do to calm down, and then that's it. So it's not going to help them. If they can see that cause and effect, then they can probably also choose to not do that behavior in the future. Some parents come to me and they say, Nicholeen, I love all the things you teach, but I taught my children these skills and some of them, they don't really like them. They don't like accepting a no answer, for instance. Well, I never said they would like it, right? I just said this was good communication. So many parents think that their child has to give them the stamp of approval on their parenting. What an interesting notion. What does the child have to compare that parenting to? Nothing. You're the only parent they've ever had. Maybe they can compare it to the neighbor, but do you really know what's going on at the neighbor's house? Or they compare you to TV, but is that very realistic parenting? No. So your child does not have to like every single thing that you teach them or the skills that you're hoping that they will learn to use. In fact, chances are many times your child will not like the ways that you're teaching them or the suggestions for how they need to grow and learn. That's just what happens when a teacher tells a child it's time to stretch or grow. Then the child has to just go through that process, which sometimes can seem uncomfortable for a minute. So don't fall into the trap that your child has to give you their stamp of approval on your parenting. Sometimes you have to stand alone as you are being the leader. The leader oftentimes is alone. Number 6, making concessions. Or some people might think of it as compromising. It is not really compromising if it's done with a power struggle. If you're saying, well, if you stop crying, then I'll do this. Or if you do that, then maybe I'll do this. That's actually called bribing, and that's a type of making concessions. And it's very anti-consistent. If a person is going to learn self-government, they need a consistent environment, which means that they need to know the skills or the rules laid out ahead of time, what the praise will look like and be like when they do things right, and what the corrections will be like if they do things wrong. So that consistency is huge. If you start negotiating or making concessions and not following through with what you told them you would do, you've undermined all of the system of communication and problem solving that you've already established for your family. So make sure you stay strong, even if it seems like that they're emotionally struggling. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't take time to understand the children. We do need to make sure that we have those talk times. Just do them when they're calm, because when a person is in midbrain and they're out of control, they can't do the problem solving, which is front brain work. Number 7 is coddling emotions. I think every parent's heartstrings get tugged when we see those big crocodile tears or a child struggling over something. We want to make sure that they know that we care, but we don't need to coddle them. When a parent coddles emotions, they give the emotion that the child is having too much attention. Okay? So if your child happens to be sad or crying, you can say, "Oh, I see that you are sad. And that's probably why you're crying. Let's talk about the situation and see if we can take some deep breaths, get happy, and see if we can understand what's going on so that we don't have to be sad anymore." So instead of saying, "Oh yeah, that makes you sad because of this," and "Oh yeah, you're thinking that," and "Oh that," going too deep, you end up getting into coddling the child, which means you're babying them. And you're making them think that they can't break out of the tantrum because then they won't get as much of your attention. But if your attention always points them toward calmness, understanding, good communication, then your child is going to feel like that's where they get the best attention, not when they're getting you to coddle them and placate to their emotions. If this information was interesting to you on these traps, then you might be wanting more information on calmness. Because as you can see, going toward calmness is one of the key things that you can do so that you don't get stuck in these traps again and again. You need to understand calmness. Your children need to understand calmness. And I have a special gift for you to help you and your children with calmness. It is called the Calm Parenting Toolkit. In the description below this video, there is a link that says teachselfgov.com/toolkit. If you go to the Calm Parenting Toolkit that is linked in the description of this video, you can have the Calm Parenting Toolkit for free. There are 10 classes in that toolkit that will help you understand better how to be calm when someone else isn't, and how to help them get calm without losing your calmness at the same time.